Hello, this is D.L. Andrews again, here to share with you a most monumental story. I think we've all heard about Joseph, son of Jacob in the Bible, and about his dreams, when interpreted meant that his 11 brothers and parents would all someday bow down to him. When Joseph told the dreams to his brothers, they hated him. And when their father Jacob made a special coat of many colors for Joseph, they hated him even more. They hated him so much that when they saw Joseph in the distance coming to check up on them, they made plans to kill him. But instead, they ended up selling him, and Joseph became a slave in Egypt. By the time Joseph had arrived in Egypt at the age of 17, he was already a well-educated young man. Because the wealthy householder who bought him, Potiphar by name, made Joseph overseer over his house and all that he had, he put into Joseph's hand, even the bookkeeping. And for Joseph's sake, God blessed all that the Egyptian had in the house and in the field. Scripture tells us that Joseph's great-grandfather Abraham was of the chief men of the earth, and we read in the book called Jasher. Now, Jasher is like the book of Genesis, only it gives a lot more detail to the stories. Here we see that Abraham, from the age of 11, had lived with Noah and his son Seth for 39 years in a cave, studying the books of Enoch to learn God's precepts and mysteries of the universe. And in those ancient times, it was very important to hand down any learning to your children and grandchildren. So Jacob, being Abraham's grandchild, would have been very diligent in the education of his children. We do not know exactly how long Joseph had been serving the Egyptian in his house and in the field, but the day came when Potiphar's wife began laying her eyes upon Joseph and accused him of something he did not do. And Joseph was cast into the Pharaoh's prison, where again Joseph was put in charge of all that was done there. As time passed, and Joseph had been in prison more than 2 full years, the Pharaoh, whose name was Djoser, had a very confusing dream. He woke up, went back to sleep, and had another disturbing dream. He called for his wise men and magicians, and they were not able to give the Pharaoh a meaning for his dreams. It was then that the Pharaoh's butler remembered his faults and told the Pharaoh about Joseph and his ability to interpret their dreams when he and the baker had been cast into the prison. The Pharaoh's servants lost no time in bringing Joseph out of the prison. And the Pharaoh said to him, "I have heard, Joseph, that you can interpret dreams." And Joseph answered the Pharaoh, "I cannot, but God can give the Pharaoh the answer that he needs." Then the Pharaoh tells Joseph his 2 dreams about the 7 skinny cows eating up the 7 healthy and fat cows, and about the 7 thin and dry ears of corn eating up the 7 plump and juicy ones. And Joseph, with his ongoing relationship with the Lord of all the earth, is able to tell the Pharaoh that God has determined to do something in the earth and has chosen to let the Pharaoh in on his plans so that he may prepare to save the land from ruin. Then Joseph gives the Pharaoh the meaning of his dreams. First, there would be 7 years of hefty harvest, followed by 7 years of fierce famine. Then he went on to tell the Pharaoh that the reason the dream was doubled is that the matter is very urgent and will begin immediately. Because of the urgency of God's plans, Joseph advises the Pharaoh to seek out a man who is wise and discreet, one who will appoint officers over the land to store up the grain and corn that is harvested during the 7 prosperous years. And the Pharaoh says to his servants, "Can we find such a one as this? A man in whom the Spirit of God is." And at the age of 30, Joseph's boyhood dreams begin to come true when the Pharaoh Joseph makes him ruler over all the land of Egypt, putting his own ring upon Joseph's hand. The Pharaoh gives Joseph an Egyptian name as ruler, but all the people of the land like to call him Imhotep, which means he who comes peaceably. Joseph begins going throughout all the land of Egypt, enlisting officers and setting up his plans for storage of the grain that is grown during the first 7 years. And in his own city, Saqqara, Joseph builds the very first pyramid in Egypt with 11 storage pits and a very impressive stairway leading down to the lower levels. There were many more pyramids built in Egypt at that time, and Joseph became known as the great architect of Egypt. The Bible goes on to tell of Joseph's brothers coming to Egypt to buy corn and how Joseph finally reveals himself to them. After a few tests of their character, of course, and then how he sends transportation for his father Jacob and the rest of his family to bring them to Egypt. But the transport vehicles are defined in the Hebrew as simply circular and revolving. Scripture tells us that when Jacob saw the vehicles Joseph had sent to carry him, the spirit of Jacob their father revived. This account of Joseph in the Bible is a great story and consumes around 20% of the book of Genesis, but it is only the beginning of Joseph's accomplishments. The most fascinating thing I have just learned is that the majority of pyramid and temple complexes worldwide were made during the same time frame as Joseph's step pyramid. While recently watching an episode about Peru, I was really intrigued with something anthropologist Theo Paredes said about the Viracocha, which is also known worldwide as the staff god, symbolized by a little figure dressed like an astronaut and holding a staff in each hand. He said, the Viracocha's real name is Kun Tiksi Viracocha Pakayakakik, which means the one who knows how to organize the time and space. When I heard this, my thoughts fled immediately to the Emerald Tablet, written by Hermes Trismegistus, which is another nickname for Joseph. And the Emerald Tablet, as translated by Isaac Newton, is all about organizing time and space. In his translation, that which is above is also below, and that which is below comes from above. In other words, the universe is sort of like a hologram, with everything that will ever be done already existing in the unseen realm. But there are 3 things, according to Joseph's Emerald Tablet, that can cause things to materialize. And Joseph ended his Emerald Tablet writing by saying, I, Hermes Trismegistus, have all 3. Now, wanting to know what those 3 things were, I went to the Bible, which contains answers for all that we need to know, and I researched the word 3. I found Apostle Paul ending his great discourse on love, saying, now abides or endures as a state of expectancy, faith, hope, and love, these 3, but the greatest of these is love. Then putting 2 and 2 together, I could visualize the staff god emblem found in countries all over the world that is thought to represent Joseph the Viracocha. But in Bolivia, there's a monolith carved out of one huge stone slab that bears an image of the staff god above the opening or gateway to the sun. He's a short, astronaut-looking figure holding a staff in each hand. The staff in his left hand separates into two parts at the top. I'd like to call that one faith and hope. The staff in Viracocha's right hand is solid at the top, so I'm calling that one love. The two missionaries in the monolith photo are Fred and Grace Borden. They served many years in Bolivia under the Wycliffe Bible translators, working in the print shop, including publishing the Bible in tribal languages. In some other parts of South America, the Viracochas, known as Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, Kukulkan, and Pachacutec. In the Hindu world, he was King Maya, and in Japan, he was the Shiva god. As Pachacutec, Joseph used every bit of space on a high mountain to organize a community with houses and other buildings, layered gardens, and an observatory temple complex. They say that Joseph, as the staff god, went around the world teaching matters of civilization, like domestication of animals, how to make tools and build houses, and how to heal themselves. Many of you watching this video are aware that there is a bit of confusion about Imhotep and Joseph being the same historical figure, and that comes about from differences in the accepted time frames for each. But Isaac Newton, in his Chronicles of the Ancient Kingdoms, sets the story straight by comparing the affairs of Egypt with the synchronizing affairs of the Greeks and the Hebrews. Also, there's another way we can tell that Joseph and Imhotep are actually one and the same. This is a photo of the Imhotep statue at a museum, and he appears to have a lump on the right side of his neck. Can you see it? Next, let's examine the wall relief of Joseph as the great physician of Egypt. There's something like an X-ray pad on his back strapped in the front, and he's standing beneath what could be a medical imaging apparatus. There is something like a flashlight on his forehead, and there seems to be a goiter on his neck, in the very same spot as on the Imhotep statue. Now, I'd like to toss in something right here, and you can either take it or leave it. Since it was Joseph who saved the world from starvation during a 7-year-long famine that covered the whole face of the earth, with all countries coming to Joseph in Egypt to buy corn. And since Joseph was the first known architect, the first known physician and healer, and the one who knew how to organize time and space, perhaps God had built the Great Pyramid and Sphinx in Joseph's honor. Jeremiah did say it was God who made all the wonders of Egypt, as well as all the other megalithic observatory and temple complexes worldwide, and that it was by his loving kindness for men of all nations, and to make for himself a name. But the Sphinx, as a lion, would represent Joseph's courage, nobility, royalty, and strength and valor in saving all the world from death by starvation. And like Joseph is the great physician, the face of the Sphinx has the resemblance of the flashlight on his forehead, and there seems to be something going on with the right side of its neck. In closing, I want to thank the team of freebibleimages.org for photos representing the life of Joseph in the Bible. I also want to acknowledge the cast of the AA series for their tenacious efforts in searching for truth, and for images gleaned from the TV History Channel. May the Lord of all the earth enlighten our understanding more and more as we see the final day approaching that will usher in God's last material kingdom on earth. And may your journey be enhanced by this story of Joseph and of others found within the pages of the Bible.